Thank you very much and welcome everyone. So glad you could join us today. This topic is a perennial favorite. I think I was asked to deliver this internally and externally over 25 times in the past year. So with no further ado, let me ask us all some questions. Do you agree with these statements? Accountability is more of a leadership problem than an employee problem. Accountability is usually viewed as something negative that happens when things go wrong or as a punishment for mistakes. Whenever people blame other people, places, and things, you have an accountability problem. Blame inhibits corrective action and undermines learning. Negative accountability never works over the long term. Accountability should be viewed as a powerful, positive, and enabling principle that provides the foundation to build both individual and company success. It is only when you build a culture of positive accountability that you have people who can and will achieve game-changing results. So before we move on to the next slide, I agree with all these statements. You may disagree with some of them, many of them. We'll find out a little more perhaps during the Q&A session. What I would offer is this regarding several of these statements. What I have seen in many organizations is, first and foremost, the second bullet point. Accountability is usually viewed as something negative that happens when things go wrong or as a punishment for mistakes. In other words, someone is informed, I'm going to be held accountable. You're going to be held accountable. And that basically means you have to get a project in on time and on budget, which is fine, but rarely is there mention of a reward or incentive for maybe getting a project in early and or under budget. It often tends to be on the negative side. I would especially agree with the idea, bullet point number 5, that negative accountability never works over the long term. And I'm often reminded of a favorite quote from management consultant Peter Drucker, who once wrote the following. He said, "If people spent at least as much time understanding what they do well and building on their strengths as they do beating themselves up over their weaknesses, they'd be much better off as human beings." I happen to agree with that, and I'll share just 2 other thoughts before we move on. When I was hired in the late 80s to work at Sprint, hired by my manager, Brian Bogosian. And he hired me to manage people in a call center, which I did, and I was doing for about 3 months when he left a voicemail one night and asked me immediately the next morning, it's a Friday morning, to come into his office, which I did. And as soon as I entered his office, he said, "Close the door and sit down." And all I could think next was, oh my God, what have I done wrong? I'm about to be fired. Instead, he said the following. He said, "Chris, I called you in here to apologize. I hired you 3 months ago, and I haven't done anything to support you. I haven't checked in with you. I haven't stopped by. I haven't even called you to see how things are going." And then I will never forget the next one. He said, "My number 1 job as your manager is to support your success. I'm here to be supportive of your success, so how can I help you?" And ladies and gentlemen, I have never forgotten that. That was the first time that someone above me in the organizational hierarchy said that their number 1 job was to be supportive of me rather than directive or commanding or punitive. And I have strived ever since. That was, my gosh, 27 years ago. I have strived ever since as a manager myself to inform everyone who reports to me the exact same thing. My number one job as your manager is to support your success. Come to me anytime. That is how I try. I don't always succeed, but that is how I try to hold myself accountable and to hold myself accountable to other people, to people who report to me. Okay, here's some big picture questions. How important is accountability in the workplace? I suggest it's very important. And on the flip side, poor cultural accountability leads to some of the following. Questionable ethics. There was a study conducted by the Center for Academic Integrity. They interviewed and surveyed over 50,000 students at 83 colleges and universities. 70% of the students they surveyed admitted to cheating. And amazingly, 41% of the faculty members who were surveyed said two things. They said, I'm aware that students are cheating, and I'm not doing anything about it. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Poor cultural accountability also leads to lack of trust, missed deadlines, poor performance, chronic efficiencies and inefficiencies. For example, in the 1980s, America's CIA agent Aldrich Ames sold United States government secrets to the Soviet KGB. It was terrible. His actions can be traced in part, though, to the CIA's fundamental inability to hold employees accountable for their performance. Agents who were doing things that were unethical, including examples like this, accepting money from a foreign government in exchange for U.S. government secrets, were not being penalized, were not being held accountable. Poor cultural accountability also leads to poor customer satisfaction, to poor safety. Gallup did a study about accountability in the workplace, and they surveyed over 47,000 employees in 120 countries around the world. That's a broad scope. I think I've only interacted with people in about 25 different countries. So Gallup has a big jump on many of us. What they found included the following. 11% of workers worldwide are engaged. In other words, they are emotionally connected to their workplace and feel that they have the resources and support that they need to succeed. Meanwhile, 62% of the employees they surveyed are not engaged. In other words, they responded that they are emotionally detached and likely to be doing little more than is necessary just to keep their jobs. And even worse, though, 27% of the employees who responded are actively disengaged. In other words, they view their workplaces negatively and are liable to spread that negativity to others. I will never forget what a colleague of mine, Harvey Simkovich, over 20 years ago, he said, Chris, if even one employee is not happy and is spreading that misery to other people, he said that employee is like a virus that spreads unchecked. And as long as a manager, he said, allows an employee with a negative attitude to spread that negativity, that manager is going to find each and every day increasingly difficult and is more than likely to encounter some kind of serious morale breakdown.